Climate change is an ever-growing concern among countries, and its adverse effects on communities and economies is forcing governments and partner agencies and organizations to take immediate action. For a systematic approach to combat climate change, the planning process must be well thought out. So, how can we address climate change effectively and incorporate climate change goals in the planning process? In this video, we share the unique factors that must be considered as governments undertake climate-responsive planning and budgeting. Climate change, as we know, is a cross-cutting issue that adversely impacts development gains. It constrains people's choices and abilities, particularly the poor and vulnerable. For example, due to erratic seasons caused by climate changes, farmers are unable to properly plan and salvage their harvests. Due to climate change, damage caused by extreme weather events are already on the rise across countries. As we've seen numerous times across the globe, extreme climate change events cannot be addressed by one sector or one program alone, because the risks cut across sectors and geographies. Geographical location and the local environment add additional layers of complexity and complication to this already delicate concern, as well as the socio-economic characteristics of the affected population. Government ministries, departments, and organizations at the local level address issues relevant to climate change to some extent. But their efforts and development plans are limited and lacking, as a deeper and wider understanding of climate risks is needed to create effective, impactful, and long-lasting solutions to climate change. Currently, plans for climate change adaptation and mitigation are often scattered across a number of ministries, such as the Ministries of Agriculture, Forests and Environment, Transport and Communication, Energy, Industry, and so on. And admittedly, coordination among sectors remains a challenge. Without better intersectoral coordination, climate change cannot be addressed effectively. Weak coordination and disconnected climate change activities pose challenges for the public financial management system, especially when it comes to facilitating planning, budgeting, and reporting on climate change expenditure. Climate change needs to be addressed simultaneously by all relevant stakeholders of public policy on a programmatic basis, keeping in view the nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, committed to by the country. One way to simultaneously address climate change across sectors is to integrate climate action in the overall planning system of a country's national development goals. Many countries have adopted different approaches to address climate change issues. Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and Thailand started with a public expenditure and institutional review. Through this, they were able to determine the baseline investments and institutional mechanisms that were in place and identify the gaps so that they could respond better to the challenges posed by climate change. Other countries like Cambodia and Indonesia have developed climate change financing framework for a more systematic response to climate challenges. Climate change financing framework is particularly beneficial as it takes a whole-of-government approach to combine top-down policy guidelines with a bottom-up approach of prioritizing climate budget allocation through the budget cycle at various levels of government. By identifying and evaluating climate risks and understanding interlinkages of the problem, better climate change integration and streamlined efforts can be made. However, Successfully integrating climate change adaptation and mitigation requires an understanding of how sectoral plans are formulated, how investments are designed, and how delivery of services is undertaken. NDCs provide a good basis for this by including climate change in sector plans and development budgets. Here, we outline 5 clear steps to integrate it in the planning process. 1. Integration begins with preparation to ensure that enabling provisions and governance mechanisms are in place for climate change mainstreaming. This means preparing plans on the national and sectoral levels. 2. Enabling environment and project plan is followed and complemented by guidance from sector ministry to project formulators on developing climate change sensitive projects in accordance with the sector strategy and plans. 3. Current and future climate risks, including gender and inclusion concerns, are taken into consideration by project developers. In some cases, it might require a more intensive process, which is the climate change cost-benefit analysis or any other approach to look at the costs and benefits of climate-related investments. 4. Development programs need to be screened by the Ministry of Planning, whether they can effectively address climate risks and support adaptation to climate change and promote climate change resilient development. 5. A robust monitoring system needs to be put in place to ensure that development plans are enabling climate change mitigation and adaptation. Feedback needs to be provided to decision makers in order for them to make informed decisions on planning climate programs across sectors. As discussed, climate change integration is important and crucial, as it also helps recognize areas for synergy by enhancing local level knowledge at the implementation level. For government and other partner organizations, tools such as the Climate Budget Tracking and Climate Change Budget Integration Index have been developed to help and assess integration of climate change in the planning and budgeting processes. Climate Budget Tracking helps measure climate change investments by identifying, classifying, and marking climate-relevant allocation and expenditure in the budget system. The Climate Change Budget Integration Index, on the other hand, helps to measure the degree to which climate change is mainstreamed in the budgeting process, including gender and social inclusion considerations. It enables the identification of gaps across the dimensions of policy, institutions, and accountability, which then could be addressed to further strengthen mainstreaming of climate change. An approach to achieve the mainstreaming of climate change into public financial management functions is the one promoted by the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, the Green Public Financial Management, or Green PFM framework. This provides a holistic approach for integration of an environment and/or climate-friendly perspective into PFM practices, systems, and frameworks. The IMF's Green PFM framework highlights that one of the key areas of integration of green priorities and concerns is located during the strategic planning and fiscal framework phase, which sets the broad policy framework and overall fiscal constraint. Green priorities, both on the revenue and on the expenditure side, should be incorporated at this early stage by doing the following. The National Development Strategy should incorporate climate-related targets and objectives for the country. The medium-term fiscal framework should provide an environmentally and fiscally sustainable pathway to achieving long-term targets. The management of fiscal risks related to climate change An important dimension of fiscal transparency should also inform the fiscal strategy. The integration of green priorities into strategic plans should be an iterative process, taking into account the size of the financing gap and the need for a green financing strategy. By mainstreaming climate change action in the planning process, governments take that positive, critical step forward towards reducing the impact of climate change on economic growth and people's lives. But this will require a whole-of-government approach and the adoption of other PFM tools and methodologies to achieve the desired results. It is without a doubt that together, with greater synergy and coordination, we can successfully plan and effectively address the impact of climate change.